Your present lacks meaning and purpose without a future goal.
The goal is not impossible, you just think it's impossible for you. It changed my life. I left my job in 6 months. Founded multiple seven-figure companies since that point and travel all around the world.
The biggest problem that high achievers face is that they shoot too low.
Instead of asking, what do I want, it's what am I willing to let go of to get it?
If you don't have a goal that's dramatically impacting your present, then it's not a good goal.
And out of all the ideas and concepts and models that you've worked on across all of your books, you could wave a magic wand and implant one idea, one model into a resistant person's mind to change their life. What would it be?
This is the first time I've ever actually shared this with someone.
All right. Doctor's in the house. Dr. Ben Hardy.
Yeah, man. Happy
3 years coming.
It's been a minute, right?
It's been a minute. Been a minute and a half. How are you? How do you feel?
I feel good, man. Here with my son Caleb, hanging out with you, man. So this is a cool room. So,
yeah, it is super cool. We got accent lights and everything, man. If you could wave a magic wand and you could take somebody that has a resistant mind and is like living a very status quo, stereotypical life, very resistant to change and new ideas, and out of all the ideas and concepts and models that you've worked on across all of your books, across all of these years, you could wave a magic wand and implant one idea, one model into a resistant person's mind to change their life. What would it be out of all the ones you've worked on?
So I would have to probably appeal to Frankl on this, Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, where he said, in him speaking to the worst situation a person could be in, right? A concentration camp, everything's been stripped of them, their pride, their dignity, their life, their family. They're in a situation that is utterly hopeless. And their past in that context actually becomes a problem because it's a place that they wish they could go. And it feels like everything's been downhill and that like their past was the peak, right? And so for Frankl, he said that any attempt to restore a man's inner strength while inside the camp had first to succeed in giving that person a future goal, right? And so like that was the premise of Man's Search for Meaning, which was, your present lacks meaning and purpose without a future goal, period. And like that's just like the crux of psychology is that your future is the driver of your present. And the better you get at that future, and in the case of Frankl and those people, like without a future goal, specifically a goal, not a broad future, not a hope, a goal. Like even in psychology, you can't have hope without a goal. And so like people often say like, what's your purpose? But purpose comes from a goal. And so, like I think that like the thing a person needs, even with what Frankl said, is you need a goal, period. Like if you don't have a goal, we can talk about the qualities of goals, good goals versus bad goals, effective goals versus ineffective, transformative goals. But if you don't have a goal, and it doesn't have to be a perfect goal, and it doesn't even have to be one you think you can achieve, right? Like I spend a lot of time thinking about impossible goals. But if you don't have a very specific goal, you're hosed. You're literally hosed.
So let's talk about goals at a advanced level. This is the doctorate degree of goal setting. Let's throw away, hey, set SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, which is bullshit, by the way.
Agree.
Time-bound. Yeah. Let's talk about if you were given a doctorate degree to somebody on goal setting, because I'm somebody also that has accomplished and set and accomplished massive impossible goals. The first one that I ever did, and to your point, I want to talk about I want to use this as like a springboard for what you teach, because it's an example.
Do it, share.
I had a goal of leaving corporate America in 2022 and replacing a $250,000 income. And my goal was to do that in 10 years, conservatively through real estate investing. Yeah. I had one person just ask me a question one time, which was, that's a great goal, Brian, and it's realistic, but how would you do that in 6 months? And I was like, what? I was like, that's impossible. And he goes, have other people done it? And I was like, I'm sure. He's like, have other people done, $200,000 a month in 6 months? I was like, sure, because I needed $20,000. He said, have people done $2 million a month in 6 months? I was like, yeah. He goes, okay, well, then the goal is not impossible. You just think it's impossible for you, so let's start there. Changed my life. I left my job in 6 months. I've been now starting and founded multiple seven-figure companies since that point and travel all around the world. And so everything that you teach, I want to go ahead and give prior validity to it. It works. And if people learned how to compress time like you're about to talk about, everything would change. It forced me to think differently. It forced me to ask bigger questions. And the most important idea that I actually work on is you can't attract $1 million mentor with a $100 goal.
True, you can.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't be looking for him.
exactly, they wouldn't be, and even if you found them and they found you, they wouldn't be attracted to you because you're not speaking the same language, you're not vibrating at the same frequency.
Yeah. Well, and you wouldn't be asking them questions that they would want to teach. I mean, if you're asking them, how do I get a job at McDonald's? They're going to be like, dude, you don't need me, bro.
Yeah, I was like, how do I buy a house a year? And then I was like, no, how do I travel the world? And so we figured it out and we pulled it off, and it was in a completely different strategy than we anticipated. And so, you know, kudos to everything that you teach, because it's like you set the goal. I can almost guarantee you're not going to get there the way that you thought, but you'll get there. So when you see people, especially high performers, setting goals, where do you normally typically see people setting them incorrectly? And what are the tweaks that you help them make? Because you said the word impossible versus possible. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I would say like the advanced model of goal setting is, first off, the acknowledgement of time. So like time itself isn't, from a psychological standpoint, time isn't outside of you. Like if I'm thinking about my future, I'm thinking about it in my head, right? And so the future and the past are psychological tools. Yes, and their primary objective, their primary purpose is to improve our present decision making, right? And so getting better at framing the past helps you not get stuck there, helps you not to repeat cycles, right? But the future is going straight back to Frankl, the future is a 10 or 100x more powerful, more potent tool than the past. And so the first like big error, I'll just lay out the errors and then I'll kind of share a more effective approach. But the common errors of goal setting are to use the past as the basis for the goal. So like you see this in a company where they're like, I did 5 million revenue last year, so let's go for 6 or 7 next year, right? Or this year, right? Mm-hmm. They're using the past as the basis for their goal. They're using the past as the basis for their future. So that creates linear thinking, that creates non-transformative thinking. Like the primary purpose of the future as a tool, and even Peter Drucker has referenced this, the future is there actually to wreak havoc on the present. Like he says, I mean, that's not exactly how he said it. He said that, he specifically said, in order for research to be effective, you need a new future that is an enemy of today. Right, and so the future, if you make and so like that leads to like you want a future that's so big and seemingly impossible, and you also want to make the deadline so intense. Like, right, take a 10-year goal and move it to 6 months. You want a future that remodels the present. Right, it's the new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Right, so like we've talked about models and thinking, but the core model is your own future, and it's using that future as a tool to impact who you are today. And so if you don't have a goal that's dramatically impacting your present, then it's not a good goal. And so goals that are based on the past aren't going to dramatically impact your present because they're just a continuation of your present, right? Often people will have too many goals, right? Like they'll have like 5 or 10 or 20 goals, or even just like 2 or 3. And most of those goals, if you just had a single huge one, the other ones would have to go away. So like, one of the stories that I tell is a young man who was on, like I wrote about him in the book, but his huge goal, which is a beautiful goal, is he wants to one day own a European soccer team. Mm-hmm. I think one thing that's really important is like people, when I tell this story, people are like, but why should he want to own a European soccer team? Like, isn't that a bad goal? Like, and I'm like, I don't necessarily think that, I'm not worried about the morality of his goal. Like, there's some people who have bad goals. Like Hitler had bad goals, right? And stuff, but is this goal moving him? Is it forcing him to advance, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe he'll change the goal in the future. But in his case, his goal was so big, but it was too far away. So in his case, he wanted to hit this goal, and I said, how long until you'll hit it? And he said, I will get there in 33 years. He said, I'll get there by my 55th birthday. And so what happened was I said, well, what if he's 22 years old. I said, what would happen if you moved this goal so that you would get there like by age 30? And he started to like tense up and freak out because he's like, well, I have a lot of things I feel like I need to do, right? So like, I think I need to get a PhD. I need to run a firm. He had this big bucket of things that he felt he needed to do in order to qualify him to one day hit the goal. Elon Musk calls those false requirements. And so one of the key things that's crucial for good goal setting is that the goal starts to strip out not only the false requirements you've placed on yourself. So in this case, again, he wants to own a European soccer team in 33 years. And as I said, well, what if we just moved it to like the next 5 or 6? He's like, well, I have all these things I feel like I need to do. It's like, well, if you only had 5 years to do it, back to your like 6 month story, it's like, how many of those things can keep existing, right? Most of them you can't do, but also most of them are not even solving your goal. Right? Mm-hmm. And so one thing is if a goal is just way too far away, even 10 years, which is very common, you're usually not solving the goal. You're solving some next step, right? So in his case, he was not solving how do I get a European soccer team. For the last few years, he's been solving how do I get into a PhD program, which has like literally zero connection.
Zero correlation.
There's zero correlation, zero connection at all. So one of the beautiful things of having a goal that seems impossible, both in scale and timeline, is that it forces you to grapple with the majority of things you're doing right now have zero relevance. They in my language, they fall below the floor. They become bad strategy. And so you have to be honest with yourself. Do you keep those things, and even though you know they're dead ends, they have some dead end, or do you just accept that that's now the goal and you won't get that? And so one thing that big goals and urgent goals do, and you can have it be impossible, is it forces you to look at those things and say, none of this stuff can get me there. The other thing it forces you to do, so it forces you to say, everything I'm doing won't get me there. The other thing it forces you to do is say, yeah, but what about all those other goals I really want to do? In his case, he really did want to get the PhD. It's like, okay, but if you want to do this, would you be willing to let that goal go? A lot of times people won't let goals go. Like they're like, yeah, but I want to do that. It's like, okay, you can, but it's going to cost you that.
That's such a powerful question, is instead of asking, what do I want, it's what am I willing to let go of to get it?
But not just what you're currently doing, but the goals that you thought you really wanted. Like one of the best things you can do is let go of a goal.
What do you use to determine which goal is worth letting go of versus which is the one to focus on? So if somebody's got like this list of goals, they've got this vision board of 10, what is the process that you can recommend to them whereby they can delineate it down to this is the actual goal and I'm willing to sacrifice the accomplishment of these other 9?
I think one of them is if you just looked at the 10 and you said, you know, which one of these is obviously the most important? Which one, if you actually hit, like pretty much makes up for the others? That might not always be the case. And so sometimes you have to say, is this the highest form of this goal? Sometimes you have to scale a goal up in order to like see where it starts to become a dead end. So like as an example for me, like when I was growing a YouTube channel, I scaled that up. And I saw that more as a pathway and a process versus a goal. I just saw it as a pathway to helping me either grow my business or spread my books. So I saw it as a pathway. But even if I scaled that pathway up, YouTube in that case, and I was like, okay, what if I had 10 million YouTube followers? Would that actually, how effective would that be at helping me accomplish like what I really am wanting to accomplish? I mean, it might have some leverage, but is it, would it really get me to where I'm trying to go? And also, what would it cost me to do that? Like even if I did it effectively and fast, like we're talking about, and I got there in 3 years, what wouldn't have happened because I went for that? Who would I have not become, right? And so part of the goal is like, who is this going to shape you to become? Because and that's exactly what Drucker said. He said, in order for research to be effective, and research is just what you're focusing on and becoming. And so for me, like, what's the goal that's also going to like, it's going to shape you in a really like the way you want to be?
I feel like the goal works on you more than you work on the goal.
It does. The future transforms the present. That's its whole point. When you go for an impossible goal, you have to grapple with all the bad ideas you're currently saying yes to, all the lesser goals that you're still thinking about. And good psychology would allow you, and good strategy would allow you to start saying, okay, like I can let that thing go. It served its purpose. I don't need to hold on to it more. I'm going to let that go. And, one of my more favorite recent books is called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by Richard Ramelton. He says that good strategy is extremely surprising because of how rare it is. And so like most people don't expect you to have a good strategy because they don't have one themselves, right? Most people are following other people, or they're doing 50 things. They're throwing spaghetti against the wall. And so when you see someone actively like let go of something, even something that was like good or successful, and like be like, no, I'm going this way. Like that's unique. That's rare. Or when you see someone say like, I'm actually going to focus on this thing. Like, again, rare. And so good strategy is very rare. And so for me, going for the impossible goal is a very valuable, I call it a valuable frame, because it forces you to look at everything you're doing and just say, almost all this is noise. And then it forces you to find more effective pathways.
I like goal setting it by using what I call like the law of zero. So it's whenever you have a goal, especially a financial goal, just add 2 or 3 zeros to it, or 2 or 3 commas to it, because then the pursuit of the larger goal will allow you to hit your original goal as a rounding error. And it's funny how many times I've done that now economically, and it is hit, and it is hit, and it is hit over and over and over again. I want to talk about your 3F framework for compressing time and hitting impossible goals in your new book. So what is this free 3F framework that you guys work on?
Yeah, so we call it the scaling framework. By the way, to this point, there's been no science-based effective framework for scaling, which was one of my frustrations, to the point of building new models that make old ones obsolete.
Talk to me, Goose. I'm scaling right now.
I feel like the topic of scaling, and it wasn't my original intent, but that topic has either been overly academic, overly complex by academics, or just made overly cheap by like online marketers, right?
Sure.
But
Great copy, bad execution.
Bad thinking. Yeah. So frame, floor, and focus is the model. Every starting point of psychology is the frame that you're operating from, right? And so everyone sees the world through a frame, and the core element of your frame are essentially the things that you find relevant. They call it signal versus noise in data science. They call it pathways thinking in psychology. So everything you see in your frame are pathways to a goal. It's how humans work. We're always trying to advance pathways to a goal. Even if you need to go to the bathroom, the pathway is going to be like, how do I find the bathroom, right? Like, so we're always just trying to find a pathway to a goal. And in business, often they have too many conflicting paths because they haven't set a good goal. So like John Doerr, he's a billionaire and venture capitalist, he said a goal properly set is halfway reached. Because if you
saw that in the book. I love that one.
Yeah, it's like if you set the goal the right way, it strips out like 90% of the bad options. And so frame is all about how we see the world through a frame. And every element of what we see in our frame are pathways to a goal. And so our frame is based on our goals. Our future is the primary thing shaping what we see and what we spend our time doing in the present. And so from frame, it goes to floor, right? Your floor is the dividing line between what you say yes and no to. More specifically, your floor is what separates the floor defines what you say no to.
Okay.
When like if someone says, that's below my floor, that's like below my standards, they mean it. I don't do that. Right? And often people's floor is below where they really say it is. They're like, I don't do that, but then they, constantly do it, right? And so your floor really shows who you really are. And in order to scale or grow, you have to raise your floor, and you have to start saying no to the things that are holding you back.
So
right?
it's the quote, you don't rise to the level of the goal, you fall to the level of your systems and habits.
Yeah. I think that's partially
floor.
right. I think it's partially right. But the truth is that the goal always shapes the system. So the goal shapes your psychology. It shapes your frame. It shapes what you see. But in all human systems, the goal is always, even in the book Thinking in Systems by Donnell Meadows, like systems theory always states that the goal is the driver of the system. So the better the goal is set, the more likely you can create a simple system to get there. You do need to create systems. And yes, like if you don't have a good system, you won't hit the goal. But the goal is what allows you to shape a system. You can't have a human system without a goal, or at least a meaningful one. And so anyways, back to frame, floor, focus. Like frame is the goal. That sets the floor, which is what you say no to. Michael Porter, who created competitive strategy, says that strategy is mostly about what you say no to. So when you raise your frame to a very high level, say you take your goal and you make it 10 times bigger, your floor has to go up, meaning like almost nothing you're currently doing works. And so it forces you then to filter and find and focus on the very few pathways and people that will get you there, right? I used my son Caleb as an example, and 10x is easier than 2x, where we were talking about like if he wanted to play college tennis, there's a lot of pathways to get there. Like there's where we live in Orlando, there's hundreds of coaches that truly could get him to college. If he really wanted to go pro, meaning he raised his frame, the floor of those coaches would have to go through the roof. Like most of the college coaches couldn't get him there, and so it would force us to filter and focus and find the few that can get you there. And when it comes to the power law, Peter Thiel often talks about the power law. The power law is that very few, and it's like the 80-20 principle, but very few things create almost all the results, right? So if you think about the S&P 500, there's 7 companies that, account for the majority of like the U.S. economy, right?
Correct.
And Bill Gates said, like a great writer isn't worth 10 times an average writer. A great writer is worth 10,000 times an average writer, right? And so when it comes to like the impossible goals, it forces such a high floor where it's like you really have to filter a lot more finely and a lot more aggressively to find those super paths, those super who's that are worth 10 or 100, not even 10x, like 1,000x, what you would find if you had a lower goal and a lower floor.
How do you know when a goal is complete? How do you know when a goal is at its highest and best form?
I would say, when you say complete, do you mean like that it's framed properly, or like you're done with it?
Framed properly. So the goal that you are setting in the pursuit, that is creating your frame, your floor, your future, and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're setting a goal, so for instance, you and I had this conversation. We can use this as an actual like in real life case study. So we were talking about my company before when we were just chatting, and you were like, all right, cool. What's your goal in the next 3 years? I said 17.5 million, 2,000 members. You go, okay, well, what would you do at 50? Like, what would you do if you wanted to hit 50 million? You know, I'm like, well, and then your brain starts working. It starts doing the click words, and you start asking bigger and better questions. But at what point can you actually make that delineation to where you're like, okay, cool, this is an impossible goal worth working on versus, you know, kind of where does that stop, I guess is the point. Because then I could say, well, why don't I do a $500 million company in 3 years? And then all of a sudden you're going from an impossible goal to actually like, that is where I'd start to be like, oh, that perhaps is a little bit delusion.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful question. It is going to come down to the person, right? Because someone could get to 500 million in 3 years.
Absolutely.
But there's like so many things. So for me, is it a valuable tool, right? I view the future as a tool. I view goals as a tool. I think people have very unhealthy relationships with goals where they're like, well, what if I don't hit it, right? Or like, what if, you know, they have all these like emotions attached to it. When from my view, every human action and every human system is driven by a goal. And so everything we're already doing is driven by goals. We might just already have like 5 or 10 competing ones, and some of them we're not even like aware of. And so everything we're doing is based on goals. And so it's like so your question is a really good one. It's like, what's an effective goal, right? At a certain point, does it stop being effective? And so for me, it's like, is it something that is very resonant? Like, is it something that is moving you to action, but is forcing you to make much better decisions than you would have made yesterday, right? So like in my case, our company, that our goal remodeled us. Where like we actually needed to go acquire scaling.com because our goal became so big that we needed to like redefine that genre. And so one of the great quotes on strategy is like, choose the game you want to play and then figure out how to win. Right. And so like I wasn't originally wanting to go into strategy and scaling, but like once the goal became so big, like that became the most obvious place to just go redefine. But our goal very practically is very similar to yours, actually. It's 5,000 members of scaling.com, but they're all scaling, right? And to do it in about 24 months. And so that would be 120 million revenue. Right? It's between 120 and 140 million revenue. That goal is very useful for us because it forces us to find super who's. Like it forces us to find really phenomenal team members. It forces us to be really sharp in what we're doing, but it also it's short enough, like 2 years, that we don't have 1 month to waste. Like we have to solve a lot of things today. Could we move the goal to $1 billion revenue in 3 years or 2 years? We could, and that would remodel us. But to your point, right now this goal is very transformative already. Like it's already huge. It's already in the realm of like, no one's done this, and it doesn't matter if no one's done it. At a certain point, we might need to change the goal.
I guess to reframe it a bit, how should you feel with the goal? Because there should be, I like to think of things like there should be a combination of excitement along with a combination of curiosity. So it's almost like excitement times curiosity times holy shit. You know, if you don't have a little bit of that
last piece is huge.
If you don't have that holy shit factor, then you're not playing the correct game. But for me, I was like, I don't want a $50 million company, at least not in the stage that I'm at right now. I really like 17.5. And it makes me feel good, and that gives me a good holy shit. but it also gives me a good, it makes
Tell
me
me
excited.
tell me what the 50 or 100 does to your emotions.
Nothing.
So, but why do you not want that?
It's not that I don't want 50 to 100 million. It's that I couldn't do it through the current business system and the current business model that we run today, which is very culture focused. And so there's a cap at how many mastermind members that you can introduce at a certain rate before dilution occurs.
Very true.
And so the game that I'm choosing to play. So another question I was going to ask as a follow up is you mentioned winnable games, and a lot of the games that I want to play are unwinnable games. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that, because as you're talking about goals, I'm like, it's almost like the goal of the goal is like goalception, right? It's a goal within a goal.
Well, every goal is a means, by the way.
Yeah, so the goal is really, I'm trying to think about how I want to delineate this. See, this is the process. And I think it is that everything that you're talking about seems to be that the true point of the goal isn't even the economics or the marathon that you're running or the thing that you're building. It's who you become in the process, right?
To some degree. I think that's a huge part of it. I think that it's also there. I mean, it's also there to force better thinking. It's there to force better decision making. Like, the future is the tool we use to make decisions in the present. And time is a tool. Like, you will advance in the next 3 years, right? And, you've already, for the most part, chosen what those 3 years are going to be defined by. And I think that it's just important for us to recognize, like, we will use this time, and it's largely our choice how we choose to use it. And we can use that time in very different ways.
Man, this is a fun one to grapple on, because even I don't know how, like, I'm choking on it too. Like, I'm choking on the question of how do you actually truly identify what you're capable of? Because I feel most of I know that because they did a deathbed study and they interviewed like 5,000 people on their deathbeds, and all of their regrets were not regrets of what they did. They were regrets of omission, things that they didn't do. So they didn't live up to the potential that they had in their marriage, in their health, in their relationships, in their economics. So my greatest fear personally is going to my deathbed, hopefully at a very, very late and old age, and saying, man, like, I'd milk the shit out of this. There's this quote that I love I don't want to go to heaven well rested.
Yeah.
So how do you, so for somebody that I'm 30 and like you're still in the hunt too, like we're all in the hunt, the worst thing possible is being unaware. It's like you don't know what you don't know. So it's like being unaware of what you're actually capable of and what your actual potential is. So what's some advice that you can give on unlocking that?
Shoot way higher. So, like, Tony Robbins wrote the foreword of this book.
I noticed that, yeah.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
Congrats.
And, like, he literally said that the biggest problem that high achievers face is that they shoot too low. Like,
ironically.
Yeah, that's it. Is that like that, I think, is the starting point, is that the goal was too low. And so that's something we all just have to face, and it's okay. Like, there are still practicalities, right? Like, you don't, like, there is an upper threshold where it's like I'm not going to get to Mars tomorrow. So, like, there is a certain point where it's just like, that's not useful. That's not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But even still, often it's too low to force you to innovate. Even in your case, how could you innovate a mastermind? I don't know, right? I'm not saying, by the way, you have to change your goal, but it's a beautiful exercise to just actually think through how would going for 50 or 100 in the next 3 years, even just as an exercise in your journal, just be like, how would I have to do that? And like, is there a way to do it without leaving this space and without leaving culture? Or would it force me to go and do something much, much different? It's just a useful exercise to use it as a tool, to not use it as a stress, or to not use it to even change things. But to just use it for what I would call pathways thinking. Again, I don't view goals as stressors, although, like, of course, when you extreme, like the deadline, like, it definitely, like, forces innovation and action, and sometimes it does create stress, but I genuinely view it as a tool. And so, like, I'm not that worried if I'm going to hit it or not, even though I'm fully committed to hitting it, right? But, like, I just genuinely use it as, like, is this allowing me to get out of the dead ends and distractions? Is this allowing me to become like, is this allowing me to go in the direction that is the best direction that I could possibly go? And to this point, it's been very effective and very fun. I'm not saying I'm like the best practitioner of it, but certainly like the futures that I've had in the past really helped me. Like to Frankl's point, like me as a young man in a very bad situation, having a future wanting to go on a mission to serve my church, like that got me out of a really bad situation as a young man. And then wanting to become a professional author, like that got me into a PhD program. That got me like and so like having these futures really does. And like to the point of the book one, like for me, it wasn't writing a book; it was to get a 6-figure book deal. Like so, like that was a 1% of 1% goal, but it forced me to get 100,000 subscribers because that was the only way I could get a 6-figure book deal. So
that's ironic because of how small that goal feels in retrospect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, it was
millions and millions. Yeah.
But it was huge. I mean, to go get a 6-figure book deal as someone who doesn't have a website, like that is impossible. Like that is laughable. Even me wanting to become I did it for a time, wanting to become a professor, and it was laughable from where I was at. Because like of where I was at, it was such a impossible goal. Like I had family members say, like, I was betting against you, Ben, like because of just your situation and who you were. Like, if I was a betting man, I would have bet against you. And like that was even like just like because that was like when I was like I'd go to a family event and be like, I want to become a professor, and like, Ben, I would have bet against you. Like you were not great and you were not in a good spot. And so like, yeah, like at a certain point, those things seem small. But yeah, I just think that the quality of the goal, right? For you choosing a quality goal, this one is very quality. So like, to your situation, you never want to. There's no point in making yourself feel bad, right? Like, so like that's bad psychology. Think about your past, think about your future in a way that diminishes your present or diminishes your future. Like that's not useful. And so like the cool part about your situation is you're already like on an insane path. Like you're on a good path. There's no reason. But the hard question is, if you had a higher goal and it did force you to go on a different path, could that be a better path? And could that transform you? And could that make a bigger impact? And it's worth at least exploring that, even though we do get attached to our path, our model, our system, our approach. It's very worthy to ask, if I did go for the bigger goal, what would that force me to do? And usually what it would force people to do is it would force them out of the center of what they're doing, and it would force them to get, other people involved, bigger, maybe not bigger, but important
most
people.
likely bigger people.
Important people involved. It doesn't always have to be bigger, but it will force you to get different people involved that can move the needle in different ways than you're currently operating.
And my last closing thought for all of this is you mentioned goals being stressors. And it's been interesting because I'm very much so in the messy middle of business right now, where it's like you've got something big enough to where you can start hiring top talent, but you don't know how to attract top talent and manage top talent, and you haven't quite been there yet. And so you have to hire the $250,000 guy or girl before you have the revenue to support it.
Amen.
And
good for you.
Scaling, right?
It's a good spot.
So yeah, so it's like sounds like somebody should buy scaling.com. And and throughout the process, somebody gave me some really, really great advice, a mentor of mine, and he goes, I'm like, man, I'm so stressed out. And he goes, okay, well, fast forward to 10 years from now, when you're running a company 100 times this size. He's like, do the actions that you are experiencing today stress you out? I'm like, absolutely not. These are blip on the radar things that my assistant would handle. Hiring, like building a sales team, doing all this stuff. I was like, that's something my assistant could do at that point. He goes, okay, cool. He's like, so each one of these levels, he's like, you're going to feel the stress of that level today, but then you're going to learn and become better at solving that thing and then move on to the next level. So he's like, you're advancing levels to the video game every single time that you stress out. So just know, just because it's stressful today doesn't mean it will be stressful forever, because you become better. Like the stressors don't go away. You just become better at solving them. So closing thought is, have you found that to be true? And any advice that you could give on, kind of processing the growth personally that comes along with the giant goals?
what I like about your situation is that it is the common situation in different forms when someone grows. Is that they have to start letting go of certain things that they're currently doing, and they have to risk their present for their future. And there's certain times when you're like, that's one of the reasons why it's hard to succeed more upon success is that risking a really great situation or a really great future or a really great company for something bigger is tough. Mm-hmm. And obviously you don't have to, burn the whole ship to the ground, but the great part is that you have solved different, very difficult things in the past. And so not to necessarily lean too much on your past as a tool, although that is like actually what David Goggins talks about doing. Like he calls it the cookie jar, right? That's what he does is he says I've done gnarly things in the past, right? And so if you find yourself in a situation, you should trust that you put yourself in this situation because your former self believed you could figure this out, mm-hmm. right? I'm in a fairly similar situation where it's the amount of things conspiring all at one time on me are so complex.
It's a bit overwhelming.
It can be, but I think at the same time you can be thoughtful. You don't have to be reactive to it. You can figure out how to solve it, and you can make better decisions, and you can have better people on your team to help you solve it. And so I think it does take honesty, transparency, having open conversations, being open where things aren't working, where they're falling apart, where you don't know how to solve it. The sooner you can have good, open, honest, transparent conversation, the faster you will solve it, the less you'll keep it, even in the addiction world, they say never fight a silent battle, mm-hmm. right? Like in addiction, often you're just keeping things secret. They say you're as sick as your secrets. So the more just dead honest and transparent you are about what you're going through, the quicker you'll solve it.
And it's funny because the more people and the more help that you'll attract along the way, because people don't want to see all of your wins and triumphs. They want to see where you're struggling, and that's where the help comes in.
It's huge. So, to answer your question, I would say kudos to you for being in that situation. I think it's really powerful to be in a situation you don't know if you can solve. And then that's when necessity and pathways thinking comes in. And then you will find some boom, and you'll get to a comfortable spot. And you're like, okay, I've solved this at least for the week or for the month. And so you will solve it. You've watched yourself solve
and
ridiculous.
Onward and upward.
Yeah. So I'm actually in a situation where it's intense, where the situation I put myself in, but I'm very confident I'll solve it, even though it's 100x bigger than anything I've tried to solve and more complex. To your idea of simplifying and figuring out the path, if you actually think about it, there is a path. Mm-hmm. And there is a pathway you can do it. Maybe you don't want to do it, or maybe you don't know if you're ready to do it, but there is the path to do it. And you can figure that out, and you can walk it. So
100x is easier than 2x. So Ben, if people want to find out more about you, if they want to read the book, where can they go?
So what's cool is that to the idea of pathways thinking, we recently brought on what I call Super Who. And so we've been able to give away the Science of Scaling audiobook for free. Our publisher is allowing us some very unique strategy because of our unique team. And so if you just go to scaling.com/audiobook, you can actually get the Science of Scaling full audiobook for free. Beautiful. So I know a lot of people prefer listening. Obviously, they're listening to a podcast right now. So yeah, if you want it for free, you can just go to scaling.com/audiobook.
Pretty easy offer to take up.
Yeah.
So guys, that's going to be in the show description. Ben, thank you so much for coming on, man. This has been a long time coming.
Thanks for very much intellectually pushing this. This is fun.
This has been a blast, man. I wish we could go for 2 more hours, but we got people knocking on the door. So, guys, it's been Ben and Brian with the Action Academy podcast. If you liked this, share it with somebody that you think could get value from it. And, of course, subscribe if you like setting big goals and accomplishing them. See you guys. Go get the book.